Sarah, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Thanks. We don't have a quorum yet. I want to go ahead and get started because I don't know how long we're going to have this room. And good morning. Welcome to the first meeting of the Subcommittee on Capital Outlay. The introduced budget adds $219 million to the biennial capital program, bringing the biennial total to $3.5 billion. Many of the new amendments before us have to do with infrastructure and life safety type projects, with a few exceptions. There are, of course, significant projects in the pipeline and other needed projects still coming down the road. Our job is to balance the capital needs and requests presented relative to our overall debt capacity. This morning, we'll hear from Department of General Services Director Joe D'Amico on several capital projects around Capitol Square. And if time permits, we may also hear from Sarah Herzog with a staff overview of the other proposed actions in the introduced budget, as well as the requested member amendments related to capital outlay. If we do not get to those items this morning, we'll defer them to the next meeting. And I apologize for jumping ahead, but we're not going to take action. But we're going to hear from Joe D'Amico. We have a limited amount of time in this room, and Joe's going to update us on what's going on around Capitol Square. No, that's okay. So, Joe D'Amico, are you there?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we're ready.
All right. Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, committee members, Senate staff, thank you for having me today to talk about projects that the Department of General Services have been identified in the introduced SB 1100 and also projects that are currently underway. I'll also start my comments by thanking the General Assembly for recognizing the needs of the facility infrastructure at Capitol Square going back to 2005 when we started to renovate the Patrick Henry building, the Capitol, Oliver Hill, the Washington building, Barbara John's. The General Assembly has recognized those needs and have supported us with maintaining those facilities. And you're going to see that in Senate Bill 1100 with the introduction of a number of projects that continue in that vein in ensuring the infrastructure around Capitol Square is sound. Next slide, please. So the agenda for this morning is to talk about the projects that are identified in the introduced SB 1100. Those are waterproofing repairs for the Capitol Visitor Center. I'm also going to talk a little bit about skylight replacement that we have going on that site. There's a new office building being proposed in SB 1100, as well as a new Supreme Court building. Also, I'm going to provide an update on those projects that are currently underway at Capitol Square, the new General Assembly building, talk about the tunnel that was authorized last year to connect the GAB to the Capitol, the parking deck that will be used to support the members and staff in the new GAB, renovation of Old City Hall, renovation of Morrison's Row, and improvements to North Drive. Next slide, please. So waterproofing repairs. Many of you know that for years we've had issues with water penetrating the Capitol steps as well as the skylight. We've, over the years, addressed it by doing our best patching the interior ceiling as the water damage occurs and attempting to caulk the outside of the steps and around the seal. We've determined that to keep that pace is not the correct thing to do. We need to address this situation and fix it once and for all for the good of the Capitol as well as the extension. So what is in the introduced budget is remove the portico steps, repair the waterproof membrane over the Capitol extension roof, repair the water damaged interior ceiling, and then replace the portico steps. Our timeline for that, again, predicated upon funding, would be that we would complete the design of that work by the fall of 2022. We'd start the repairs the spring of 2023 after the 2023 session and have those repairs completed by the fall of 2023 prior to the 2024 session. SB 1100 identifies a funding proposed amount of $4.5 million for that project. Next slide, please. Replacing the skylight. You'll see some pictures here where that show the inside of the extension looking up through the skylight, and there you can see some rust stains on the skylight area. That identifies the fact that we've got water coming through. The current glass skylight at the base of the portico steps. DGS has funding to replace that skylight, and we are moving forward with that repair. We have the design complete. It's been approved by the Art and Architectural Review Board, the Capitol Square Preservation Council, as well as the clerks. We will be starting construction on this site the spring of 2021 and complete this in the summer of 2021. You'll see in the bottom left-hand corner the design that has been approved for this space, which is very similar to what you see existing, replacing the glass inlays with granite. Next slide, please. Construction of a new office building. In the introduced budget, there is a proposal for design funding for DGS to design a new state office building on the former 7th and Main Street, Virginia Employment Commission building site. The General Assembly authorized pre-planning in this area in Chapter 1289 in 2020. The building right now is conceptually to be designed as a 350,000 gross foot square building, 600 parking spaces. And what we would do is replace the Monroe building that is currently about a 500,000 gross square foot building and 624 parking spaces.
Joe, if you could remind us who's in the Monroe building right now.
Yes, sir. We have a multiple number of tenants. Some off the top of my head include Treasury, Department of Small Business and Supplier Diversity, the Office of the Inspector General, VITA, Department of Accounts. We have the Auditor of Public Accounts. So we have a number of agencies that are in the Monroe Tower.
Is it anticipated that the Monroe Tower would be surplused or sold or used for something else?
Good question, Mr. Chairman. In the next slide, I'll go into that in a little bit more detail to talk about the Monroe Tower.
Okay.
So in looking at the Monroe Tower and why we are looking at this new building, the building was constructed in 1981. It's got some life safety, security, ADA building issues that are very expensive to address. It has an inefficient design for how our agencies operate today. We took a look at a study done by a consultant to give us an estimate of the cost associated with trying to maintain that building over the next 30 years, in addition to replacing the furniture, fixtures, and equipment that are now aging as well. That price tag comes in at about $300 million. We also took a look at, well, if we got out of the Monroe building and we went to lease space, what would that cost us over about a 30-year lifespan? You'll see the number there at about $343 million. We have a broker opinion of value of that building of $28 million. So to answer your question, Mr. Chairman, that if it were the will of the General Assembly, if this plan were approved and the General Assembly would look to surplus this building, then we would look to surplus it to the needs of the Commonwealth. And again, right now, our estimated value is $28 million.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Continuing on with the discussion of the new office building, just to give you a sense of the numbers. If we did receive design money to move forward, we would look to complete the design in fall of 2022. And then if there were funding authorized for the actual development of this site, we would look to demo the existing building in the fall of 2022, begin constructing the new building in 23 and complete it in 2026. The amount that's in SB 1100 for detailed planning is $11.3 million. Our estimate cost of construction is $282.9. That includes the furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So if you compare that number to what I showed you as to the maintenance cost going forward over the next 30 years at $300 million, and then the lease cost for lease space at $343 million, when you start looking at developing this site from an economic standpoint, the numbers shake out to developing this site as the solution for our state agencies at Capitol Square.
And Joe, the estimated project cost includes demolition of the building at 7th and Main?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, a question before he leaves that.
Senator Hanger.
Thank you. Joe, we all know the world's changing now. Have y'all done any projections, or is the conversation focused at all on telework now and building half of that building and the rest of the people working at home rather than being in a cubicle in an office building?
That's a great question, Senator Hanger, Mr. Chairman, Senator Hanger. So reminder, the current Monroe Tower at about 490,000 square feet. We're taking this building down to 350,000 square feet with the thought, exactly, Senator Hanger, as you pointed out, that there are going to be changes in the way that our state agencies operate in our offices. And we believe that some percentage of that work will be in a telecommute state, allowing us to reduce the size of the building that we're contemplating at this site by about 140,000 square feet.
Okay. Thank you, Joe.
Yes, sir. Next slide, please. Construct a new Supreme Court building. So there is design money proposed in SB 1100. Just a reminder for some, DGS has been for about 8 years now carrying the current Supreme Court building in its capital outlay plan as a renovation of the current existing building. Back in 2020, Chapter 1289, there was authorization for DGS to continue to move forward with that renovation planning. We hired a consultant and asked them to take a look at that existing building to look at the costs associated with it. And again, to emphasize Senator Hanger's comment about how agencies operate today, we wanted them to take a look at, was that building designed as efficient as possible to include the security needs of a Supreme Court and the type of operations that occur there. And so the conclusion that came out of that, well, I'll get to the Supreme Court building in a minute, but let me talk about the project description, and then we'll talk more about the existing Supreme Court. So the proposal is to demo the Pocahontas building, West Tower, and possibly the East Tower, to build a 213,000 gross square foot building there, 25 parking spaces, and to vacate the Supreme Court building with a 200,000 gross square foot building and 10 parking spaces. The existing Supreme Court building, as I mentioned, we had a consultant take a look at it, was constructed over the time period of 1919 to 1951. a number of mechanical, electrical, and plumbing issues beyond the useful life. The building not designed to meet today's security configuration, ADA noncompliance, and environmental concerns, and the inefficient design that I commented on before. So looking at this Supreme Court building, we decided that, are there options? And what we took a look at was, once the General Assembly moves out of the Pocahontas building, we started to think about how we were going to use it. Did it make sense to look at that site for a new Supreme Court building? And that's where we've landed. So the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about it. So when we looked at the cost estimate to renovate the existing building at $173.8 million, and from a timing standpoint to complete that renovation, we would not have it complete until 2029. And even with the renovation, we, DGS, along with the Supreme Court, and looking at it, we didn't believe that we could still renovate this building to meet the needs of the Supreme Court now, as well as the Court of Appeals that's in this building. And then going into the future, should there be any additional expansion of staff on either one of the courts. And the building did not lend itself to appropriate renovation for security matters. So looking at the construction of a new building, the timeline, again, if funding were approved, we could complete the design of the new building in the fall of 2022, begin the demo of the existing building once the General Assembly moves out in the fall of 2022, begin construction on this site in the fall of 2023, and then complete construction in the spring of 2026. So you'll see there that we are addressing the Supreme Court's needs 3 years sooner than if we were to go through a renovation of the existing building.
Mr. Chairman.
The funding that
Senator Howell has a question.
Yep.
I am assuming that your recommendation would be the same regardless of whether we increase the size of the appellate court or not. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, that's correct. That this new development would give us the ability to be nimble over the next year or two to address any expansion that may be approved in either one of the courts. If we were to attempt to expand in the existing Supreme Court building, there is no room to expand beyond the current FTE count, again, in working with the court and looking at these numbers, and we would have to relocate any additional staff to another facility.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, at the conclusion of this presentation, I would like to come back to that topic for an editorial comment.
Do you want it?
No, after we finish.
Okay,
please.
that's fine. Okay.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
so
sir.
The estimated cost for the development, as we've looked at it in a preliminary manner, is $155.5 million. That includes the demolition of the existing facilities and the construction of the new facility. And when we compare that number to the renovation cost, again, the numbers pen out that we ought to take a real serious look at the development of that Pocahontas site.
Let me ask you, Joe, what happens to the existing Supreme Court building?
Yes, sir. Good question. The existing Supreme Court building is not on a historic register. However, it is in a historic district. So the thought of the state maintaining ownership of that building would be DGS's recommendation. And at this time, giving consideration to how it could be used, quite frankly, to support office space that we currently have state agencies in lease space around the Richmond area. That would be a project, obviously that would be 5-10 years down the road, but our initial thought, Mr. Chairman, would be and that we the state maintain control of that site, also because of its proximity to Capitol Square.
It just seems to me, in the basement of that building, you've got machine gun slots and area. I think there was a Federal Reserve Bank there or something at one point. So there's a lot of history in that building that would be a shame to lose.
Mr. Chairman, it's a beautiful building. It's a wonderful structure. And it's something that the state should maintain in its inventory and address when able to.
Okay. Thank you.
Next slide, please. Okay, so we've been through those projects that are in the introduced budget bill. Let's run through the projects that the General Assembly has authorized and what you currently see occurring around Capitol Square. The new General Assembly building. The project will be one floor below grade, 14 floors above grade, a 422,000 gross square foot building when complete. On the first floor, you will have food service. We have addressed security needs in this building, working very closely with Colonel Pike and the Capitol Police. This building will also have a tunnel that will connect to the 9th and Broad Street parking deck, as well as a tunnel to the Capitol that was authorized in 2020. Next slide, please. Timeline for the building. As you all know, we're currently under construction. We will be topping off the steel on the building, I believe actually today. We are hanging precast around the building, starting to enclose the envelope, and have started with framing the building out from the basement moving up. Scheduled completion for the building is the summer of 2022. Being able to occupy the building in the fall of 2022 and having the building ready to go for its first General Assembly session in 2023. The total project funding over the years for this building that's been authorized is $245 million. And at this time, we are on schedule and within authorized funding budget. Next slide, please. Just a couple pictures of where we are today and where we will be in 2022. You'll see here a picture of the main lobby on the first floor of the new building. On the upper left-hand side is where we are in construction today. Lower right is a rendering of the finishes in this space. Next slide, please. Another example, this is the second floor atrium that is across from 2 House committee rooms. On the left-hand side where we are today in construction, on the right, a rendering of the completed space. And if you look through those large window openings, you'll see the Capitol. So that space will have a view overlooking the Capitol and the Capitol grounds. Next slide, please. This is a picture of the encapsulated tunnel area under 9th Street going from the west side of the General Assembly building underneath 9th Street to the parking deck site at the corner of 9th and Broad. Obviously, it's not a finished area, but wanted to show that we have cut through under the street and we are waiting to accept the connection once we start construction on the 9th and Broad Street deck, which I'll talk about in a few moments. Next slide, please. In the 2020 session of the General Assembly, there was authorization for a tunnel connecting the General Assembly building to the Capitol. We have started down the path in design for that tunnel. You'll see here a drawing showing how that connection will will look. It's about a 600-foot run from the General Assembly building, coming out south from the GAB, going east, then south along the equestrian statue, and then to the northwest side of the Capitol extension. We also have had to design an exit stair onto Capitol Square that is required by the building code. And you'll see on the next slide where that stair will be located. Next slide, please. So as I said, we're currently underway in design. We're going to take this in 2 phases.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Howe.
we have lost the slides.
We don't have the slides anymore. Sarah, can you help us?
Sure, I will try to resend them. Just a moment.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Chairman?
We have it. Thank you, Joe.
Yes, sir. So the new GAB tunnel, we talked about, we're currently under design. We're going to take it in 2 phases. Phase 1 will be completed in the winter of 2021 prior to the 2022 session. And it will take us to a point on Capitol Square where you see on this slide, you'll see a brick walkway. And then just to the north of that walkway, you'll see an exit stair that is just under a tree canopy. That will be the phase 1 piece of this work where we will stop until after the 22 General Assembly session, and then pick up with the phase 1 piece of this work, which will take us from that area on down to the Capitol extension. So this first run is probably about 150, maybe 200 feet. Then the next phase 2 is roughly about 400 feet. Again, I commented that we need an exit stair. You see where this exit stair will be placed on Capitol Square. This design has been reviewed by the Art and Architectural Review Board, the Capitol Square Preservation Council, and the clerk's offices. Total project funding that was authorized in 2020 for the tunnel is $25 million. We are currently on schedule, and we are within the authorized funding. Next slide, please. 9th and Broad Street parking deck. Project description, it will be a 500-car parking deck. 300 of those spaces will be under the control of the legislative branch, 200 by the executive branch. It'll be 7 levels, 6 above grade, 1 below grade. There will be 25 electric charging stations. This building will also have an area where we have office space on the first floor. The agencies scheduled to go in there are a portion of the Division of Legislative Automated Services, Commission on Youth, and the Chesapeake Bay Commission. And again, there'll be a tunnel that connects this facility to the new GAB. Next slide, please. Here you see a rendering of the 2 facilities side by side, the new General Assembly building and the parking deck. Project timeline, the design is complete. Construction begins early spring. I actually talked to the contractor on this job yesterday. They will mobilize on the site in February to start their work. The construction will be completed the summer of 2022. That lines up very well with the completion of the General Assembly building. We'll take occupancy of this facility in late summer, early fall of 2022, and it will be ready in 2023 for the first General Assembly session in the new GAB. So that parking facility will be ready to support the members and staff working in the new GAB. Total project funding for this facility is $34.9 million. We're on schedule and we are within the authorized funding amount. Next slide, please. Old City Hall. As you all know, this is a National Historic Landmark. We are addressing the facade exterior and the occupied space interiors of the facility. We are addressing those in accordance with the Secretary of Interior standards. The tenants in this building, it's split between legislative and executive branch agencies. You'll see a listing here: Division of Capitol Police, the balance of the Division of Legislative Automated Systems, Capitol Square Preservation Council, and then the Department of Human Resource Management. Next slide, please. Our timeline, design is complete. We're well underway with construction. We hope to complete this late winter of 2022 and ready for occupancy in the spring of 22. I did receive some information yesterday from the construction team that there were some unforeseen conditions that have been identified relating to some asbestos issues and some construction issues in the basement of this building that may impact the schedule of this building, may make it slide right about 60 days. But right now, it looks like from a funding standpoint that we have sufficient funds to address those issues from our contingencies.
Mr. Chairman.
So,
Senator Norman.
You know, for those of us that have been around for a while, I remember when Old City Hall was really considered an iconic feature in the city of Richmond. It seems to me to be a bottomless pit, and we have renovated it so many times. What does it take to just tear it down?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Norman, I don't have that number readily available, but I'd be happy to provide a cost estimate to you, sir.
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. Next slide, please. Morrison's Row. It's a facility that's on the National Register of Historic Places. The row homes were built in the 1850s, approximately 23,000 square feet. We are adding an addition to the south side of this building to address the ADA issues with the existing 3 row homes. The tenants for this facility have yet to be determined, but it will be some form of state agencies, and it will be used as office space. Next slide. Renovation timeline, design is complete, construction is underway. Construction scheduled to be completed this summer. Occupancy later this summer, early fall of 2021. Total project funding is $15.5 million, and we are on schedule and within the authorized funding for this project as well. Next slide. North Drive security. As many of you have seen over the past year or so, when we have security matters around Capitol Square that need to be addressed and we need to secure North Drive, it's been a process that we've used dumpsters, we've used construction fencing, just to be able to maintain this area in a secure way. Working with, again, our Capitol Police partners. We have taken a look at how to address this area to maintain the security needs, but also address the area from an aesthetic standpoint. So what you have in front of you is a design that has been completed, has been through the Art and Architectural Review Board, Capitol Square Preservation Council, and the clerk's offices. This design will take us back to the 1865 entry gate that once existed in this area, but also provide us the security needs that are also needed to address the concerns that we have in this site. We also will be building a new Capitol Police Post to replace Post 1 that's at the base of the equestrian statue and replacing the asphalt at the entry area. Next slide, please.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Norman.
my next door neighbor has something called invisible fence. Why don't we just put a high voltage electrical fence around there that will discourage people from crossing that line?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Norman, that is an option, one that we did not pursue. North Drive security enhancements. The design's complete. Construction begins late winter this year, early spring this year. We'd like to get this construction completed, and we will by the fall of 2021. We'd like to have this in place before the 2022 inauguration. Total project funding that's been authorized in Chapter 854 is $2 million. We are on schedule and we are within authorized funding. Mr. Chairman, committee members, that concludes my presentation. Be happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you so much. That comment about the electric fence reminded me, I live out in the country and I've got an electric fence around my house to keep my donkey and my horses out in the field. Well, my youngest daughter lived in Alaska for several years, and Siobhan and I went up there to see her a few years ago, and we went to a wildlife preserve, and Siobhan happened to back into one of those electric fences. And let me tell you this, it took her several weeks to be right again.
Well, Mr. Chairman, then that just reinforces my suggestion, because if we could knock them out for a couple of weeks.
You wanted to make comments about the court. Do you want to ask Joe questions? Joe, thank you very much for your presentation.
Yes, sir.
Senator Norman, if you've got something about the court, then probably now is the time to.
It doesn't have to do with construction. It's actually totally unrelated to anything that Joe just went over with us, and I do compliment him, boy. Gosh, what an expansive projects that they've got going, and the Capitol area is going to look remarkably different and remarkably more efficient, and I'm so excited about the completion of the Leo Waldrop Tunnel. But having said that, the other day when we were having a presentation from Secretary Moran, my dim light bulb went off a little bit, and I respect that there are some initiatives with the new majority to change the way some things are done, and I mean that respectfully. And I'm hoping that Madam Chairman and her team are being vigilant on the correlation between some of these policy decisions and the ultimate cost of them, that we can make policy decisions, or some who are not on finance can advocate policy decisions insensitive to what the cost is. And what triggered my thought was the legislation to good time credit on it, and where on the slide it showed we need 73 new FTEs to do that. And I'm just thinking, as we go along and we make some of these other decisions, there is a cost that is associated with it. And Madam Chairman, I don't know who is the appropriate person, but I would be very interested in the proposed governor's budget. What are the total number of new FTEs that we are anticipating? Because that is an embedded reoccurring cost in perpetuity, and things, in spite of the pandemic, are economically a little robust, but it's inevitable we're going to get another downturn, and we're going to have to deal with that. So I don't say that with any criticism to any initiative or anyone. It's just something I think we really ought to be very, very conscious of. And on the Court of Appeals, the initiative to expand that, Well, it's not just 5 new judges. And again, I'm not being critical of the issue, but it's not just 5 new judges. It is the square footage of the space that you need in the new building. It is all of the clerks and administrative support staff. And so it's not just the number of 5 new judges and here's what their comp is. It is a much larger issue, and I just think we ought to be sensitive to it. And again, redundant. I'm not criticizing the policy. I just think as we are the keepers of the purse, we just need to be aware of these things. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman,
Senator Howe.
I think we easily can get staff to do the analysis of how many new full-time FTEs. I think that'll be easy, and you're very welcome to ask for that. Or if you want, I'll ask for that.
I think he raises very important issues with respect to.
I just did not want to ask without
Yeah,
talking
please
with you,
do.
Madam.
Please do.
Sarah, you are the keeper of the clock, and I don't know how much more time we have in this room, but I've got on the agenda that if we had time, you were going to discuss an overview of the governor's proposed amendments and then an overview of the members' proposed amendments. Do we have time?
Yes, sir. Apparently the room is slightly more flexible. I wasn't sure whether the members had arranged their morning based on the projected 8:35 end time. So our options are to do number 2 on the agenda and or number 3, or to defer both to the next meeting at your pleasure.
Well, are you all here? Let's keep going then.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks, Sarah.
I'm sharing the screen. For item number 2 on your agenda for the review of the introduced budget, I will be speaking from the document that we refer to as the summary document of the introduced budget, using the excerpt on the capital outlay slides. First, you will see the table that summarizes the actions, beginning with where we were in Chapter 56 from the 2020 special session, and the total capital program totaled $3.3 billion. In the second column, you see a summary of the proposed amendments before you this session, which includes $18 million general funds, a combined $135.5 million in Public Building Authority and College Building Authority tax supported bonds, and then also some 9C 90 revenue bonds and some non-general fund cash. We'll just also, going back to the first column, point out that originally there was some general funds for planning in 2020 that was removed in the special session. So now your total package with the new proposed actions is $3.5 billion. Just briefly before walking through each of the components of the proposed amendments, I'll just note that your annual debt capacity was updated based on the package in 2020 and did decrease by about $200 million per year over each of the next 10 years based on the current methodology of using a 10-year look. It is still about $500 million. I should note that the Debt Capacity Advisory Committee made a maybe somewhat unusual point in its letter this December, encouraging the General Assembly to potentially consider rescinding some current projects given the magnitude of the pipeline and the $6 billion in authorized but as yet unissued debt. There were no specific suggestions as to where to look for that. So going down a bit, the first bullets you see in the summary are those that you heard this morning as far as the general fund planning for those DGS projects, the Supreme Court and Court of Appeals building and the new state office building, and then $500,000 for a DJJ project related to a water tank at Barrett. To the next page, there's also $6.8 million across 4 projects for equipment, 4 projects that are nearing completion and will be coming online in the next 18 months. The single largest dollar item before you in the proposed amendments is again proposing $58.5 million to increase the bed capacity at Central State Hospital by 48 beds, bringing the bed capacity to 300 beds. Project was originally in the 2019 construction pool, with the addition of the proposed $58.5 million would bring the whole project to $374 million.
And Sarah, I confirmed with Commissioner Land, it's exactly the same project that was rejected by the General Assembly in 2019 and 2020. Coming back for a third time.
Yes, sir. At the bottom of the page, there is a small 2021 capital construction pool. It's $11.7 million and includes mostly projects related to infrastructure and life safety. In addition, there are standalone projects also related to infrastructure and life safety. First, the chart shows the new projects that are in the pool. The one that is a new project is at Gunston Hall. It's about $2.4 million for reconstruction of the East Yard enslaved quarter, having to do with the archaeological work, a construction of a wooden structure, and potentially relocating the executive director's current quarters. On the workforce development projects is an adjustment to the amounts for tech talent based on the MOUs. And then you see the beginning of the standalone projects. The largest single of which for any one institution is Virginia State University. That one is $34 million. It has to do with 5 major buildings as well as some smaller cottages across campus. So that is a campus-wide project, whereas some of the others are smaller. Moving down to, there also were 2 9C revenue projects proposed, and those were included in the chair's bill that the committee reported this week, both at Virginia Tech. One was a parking related to the new academic building at the Innovation Campus, so an auxiliary piece, and then also the Upper Quad Residence Hall at Virginia Tech. This is a supplement related to the Corps of Cadets housing. Both of those are supplements. There are also 2 9D projects proposed, one at George Mason and also one at Virginia Tech. This one at Virginia Tech has 2 pieces. One is moving it from operating funds for planning to 9D. So you see the offset in the following table. And then the chart summarizes the net $10.5 million after reducing by shifting the Virginia Tech project across various agencies statewide for their non-general fund projects, including the new state forest at forestry, some additional funding for acquisitions of state parks, a DOC project, which is non-state funds for wastewater treatment in Goochland, replacing the Winchester DMV, and then some renovation projects at the Veterans Care Center, and an airfield flight control tower with the Department of Military Affairs. Finally, there are a handful of language amendments proposed. One related to the $40 million economic development project that was included last session at Portsmouth Marine Terminal. The proposed language now refers to potentially projects involving infrastructure enhancements as well. There is proposed adjustment to a particular project at George Mason University. An update is that the university would prefer not to have this flexibility at either campus as they continue to plan in their master plan process to keep it planned for Prince William campus. It's also language related to a Northern Virginia Community College system project having to do with the connector space between 2 buildings. Also updating the Frontier Culture Museum New Crossing Gallery scope now that the detailed planning is underway. And finally, some adjustments to the particular natural area preserves that are noted in the language of the appropriation. And that completes the review of the introduced budget. I will switch slides to the proposed amendments when you're ready.
We're ready.
All right. That is big enough. Here is a 1-page summary of the 24 amendments having to do with capital outlay that have been submitted. You also were sent the actual half sheets for each of these amendments. The first column is just a line number for reference on this table as we work through it. The second column refers to the page numbers in the 15-page document of the half sheets that I will walk through. And for the very first one, I think I should apologize that this is generally a topic that is discussed in the General Government Subcommittee. This is Senator Hanger's amendment related to the Middle River Regional Jail expansion amount. On page 2 of the half sheets, Senator McClellan's amendment related to the HBCU's language. It's language only, and it has to do with ensuring that if there are restrictions on state university debt that prohibit institutions from taking advantage of certain elements of the federal stimulus act, that those would be removed. On page 2 is a steam plant project at JMU on the East Campus. This is a combination of $4.6 million related to E&G, as well as about $2 million that would be supported with auxiliary funds. On page 3 is Senator Spruill's amendment for a new dining facility at Norfolk State University. This would be a 9C project, and I understand that they initially were not pursuing the financial feasibility study that is required, but may be working on completing it now. The next on the bottom of page 3 and top of page 4 is Norfolk State University to acquire a preschool academy. Senator Spruill spoke to at the meeting yesterday. The bottom of page 4, top of page 6 is $500,000 additional for planning at Central Virginia Community College for renovations at Amherst and Campbell Halls. This one, another one you'll see had been proposed in 2020. Most of the VCCS projects had been pared back initially on the Senate side and trying to manage the overall magnitude of the whole package. And this one and the other one were two that were not included in the conference report ultimately. On page 5 is $1.3 million in authorization related to the crossing gallery for additional detailed planning for that project. Not yet for the full construction amount. On side 6 is the first of 2 amendments related to a community green space project at the Science Museum of Virginia. This one that you see reflects $2.5 million supported with state funds, potentially also $5 million in private funding for a $7.5 million total project. Then if you look down to the very bottom of your slide on line 24 is a language amendment for the same project if it would all be from private funds as opposed to a combination. On line 6 is Senator Sorrell's amendment for almost $30 million for construction of phases 2 and 3 of Widewater State Park. On page 7 is the first of 2 amendments related to State Police Division 6 headquarters in Salem. This one here is the $19 million to construct the project, which would also involve co-locating VDOT traffic operation centers. Looking down below on line 13 is also the planning funding as opposed to the full planning for the project. On page 7 to page 8 is general funds for University of Mary Washington for the Performing Arts Center. This item and the next one were both included in the planning pool last session. Although they remained in the planning pool, the general funds were removed in the special session when general funds and all the new spending was unallotted. So this is general funds for that specific component of the planning pool. And also on line 8, in a similar status is $2.1 million for the planning funds for the Leadership and Ethics Facility Phase 2 at Virginia Military Institute. The next item is the planning funds for the State Police Headquarters that I mentioned. On line page 9 is funding for the second community college project that I mentioned, the French Slaughter building at Germana Community College, a total of $36 million project. The bottom of page 9, top of page 10 is Senator Edwards' amendment for a cooperative extension project at Virginia Tech, almost $27 million. Another Virginia Tech project on page 10, Senator Edwards is constructing the undergraduate lab building. There are a few projects in a similar status as this one, which were included in a planning pool in 2016 and have not yet been authorized for construction. Next one on page 11 for William & Mary is the Integrated Science Center Phase 4. This one is about $77 million. And like the previous Virginia Tech project, this one had been included in 2016 for planning and not yet authorized for construction. Bottom of page 11, top of page 12 is a supplement to the project for replacing the research facility, Chesapeake Bay Hall at VIMS, as it was discovered that there were substantial issues with the envelope of the building and the initial dollar amount was insufficient for the full project. On page 12 is a almost $40 million amendment for water quality improvement funds for wastewater funding needs. The bottom of page 12 is almost $60 million amendment for stormwater local assistance funds related to DEQ's 2020 needs assessment. On page 13, item C72 is a language amendment also related to that item that had proposed changes in the introduced budget relating to the port's language. This would allow for multiple projects, not just one project under the existing $40 million. Bottom of page 13 to page 14 changes the title on an existing state police project for the construction of Area 13, would expand it to not say just construction, but acquire, renovate, or construct. On page 14 is $10 million for Nemo Parkway in Virginia Beach. And I already mentioned the last one on page 15 is the second option for a community green space project at the Science Museum of Virginia.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
That completes the amendments before the subcommittee.
Does anybody have questions about any of the amendments?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Howe.
it's not a question, it's sort of a thought. From time to time, finance staff sends legislators notebooks with specific information on, for example, tax policy. And I'm wondering, have we done that on capital outlay? Because the reason I ask is some of the senators seem confused about the process, and it might help us all to have a better understanding of the various types of bonds when they're used and how, for example, a college or university gets on the list.
Certainly, we have some reference materials, and if time permits, if you would like to have that teed up for your next meeting, we could work on that as additional background on the capital process as well.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Senator Howe.
I'm more thinking about members who are not on finance and not on this subcommittee. And it's not urgent. I would just think over the summer or whenever, if we could get that information out to all the members, I think it would help us all.
It might be useful, Madam Chair, to have that as part of the next Senate Finance Committee retreat. Have some education on how these projects are developed, because otherwise there's some members that may have unrealistic expectations, and perhaps I do too occasionally, about what can be added to the capital improvement list.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Are there other questions?
Mr. Chairman, this is Adam here, and if you don't mind, I actually have an answer to Senator Norman's question regarding the number of FTE, if you just want to get that out of the way.
Oh, yes, sir.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, Senator Norman, it looks like quick analysis, there were 348 additional positions in the governor's introduced budget, and that's all funds. So general funded positions would total 241.
Adam, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, unless there's anything else to come before the subcommittee, we'll rise. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Adam.